15 minutes to 5 p.m. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. Just a quick look at your iftar times in the major cities before we move on. Durban 5:58 p.m., Johannesburg 6:11 p.m., and Cape Town 6:46 p.m. You are tuned into the weekend edition of the Iftar Drive. Let's jump straight into our next segment. That is, of course, Palestine Watch with Khalid Vawda. Brother Khalid, assalamu alaikum. Shukran for joining us.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah khair for having me.
It's been a busy time since we last spoke. I know the ceasefire resolution was one of the major stories that were grabbing the headlines over the past 2 weeks or so. We did finally see a ceasefire resolution being passed in the United Nations Security Council, but unfortunately, the fire has not ceased. Let's start there. Your thoughts on the ceasefire resolution and the developments since then?
I think so. It's similar to what we spoke about previously in that the resolution's a good one, but it shows the toothlessness of the international bodies in that nobody can implement any of these resolutions. The United Nations has had over 70 resolutions which have been ignored by Israel over the last few decades. And although this one was fairly strong in that it came from the United Nations Security Council, again, it goes to show how disproportionate and lopsided the UN Security Council is in that none of its resolutions can actually be implemented. What it does show is that public opinion, is shifting dramatically and drastically against Israel. So that's the one small positive we take out of this. But overwhelmingly, the fire and bombing hasn't stopped. It won't stop. And Israel is a law unto itself.
And then, of course, Palestine has recently observed Land Day. And of course, some reports suggesting that up to 27,000 hectares of land confiscated just since the 7th of October. We know that thousands of deaths that have occurred since then, the murders, shall I say. But of course, Land Day, and then, of course, some more land confiscation.
So that's been observed around the world through protests all of yesterday. This actually started in 1976 when a whole lot of land was grabbed and seized, again, further illegally by Israel. As you correctly mentioned, since the October 7th, since then, especially in the West Bank, more than 25 communities have been displaced. This is in the West Bank alone. It amounts to just under 2,400 square kilometers. That's a lot of land. They're just grabbing land. They're approving settlements. They have approved buffer zones around the settlements. And that's just an attempt to steal more land.
And then, of course, the US, as usual with its double standards, trying to build a pier for Gaza to get some aid there, but then, of course, still supplying weapons to Israel.
Yeah. So the hypocrisy of the United States comes through once again. Publicly, they're crying crocodile tears in that they don't want an offensive into Gaza, and Israel's got to present a full plan for the population of Rafah that's displaced. We know there's more than close on to 1.5 million people in Rafah right now. That's 5 times the normal population of Rafah. So there hasn't been a plan in place, and Israel's been adamant, their leaders have been adamant that they're going into Rafah no matter what, and even if the international community stands against them, even if the United States stands against them, they're still going to go into Rafah. So despite all of this and the disapprovals from certain members of the US Congress and even Joe Biden himself, United States just approved, green-lighted $2.5 billion worth of weapons to Israel. 1,800, 900 kilogram bombs and 500, 225 kilogram bombs. What are these bombs going to be used for? So on the one hand, the US is telling everybody they don't approve, they're crying out for the loss of life in Gaza, but on the other hand, they're still supplying weapons and they're still supplying bombs to the occupation. But the pier that you mentioned,
yes.
Sorry. The pier that you mentioned, this project, by most accounts, is not a US project. US is a proxy of Israel in that Israel wanted this pier for a long while, and it serves many purposes. One being that Israel has control over Gaza again. It has control over Gaza's seaports again. It can have access in and out whenever they want. It can seek to deport people, put them on boats and deport them whenever they want. It virtually can render the Rafah crossing meaningless. with the impact that it's going to have. And the irony behind the pier and the money that's being spent behind the pier is Palestinians have been calling for heavy machinery to remove the rubble, to recover, the bodies of people who've been martyred. That request has been refused. The minute the talk came up about the pier, heavy machinery has been allowed in, and they're using the rubble of the demolished properties, homes, and buildings in Gaza to construct the pier. The dark irony here, it's beyond dark, it's just pure evil, is that there are still bodies within the rubble which have not been retrieved. We know by some accounts there are more than 7,000 bodies of Gazans that are stuck underneath the rubble that have not been retrieved in over 6 months. So those body parts are part of the rubble that's been used to construct the pier in Gaza. It's just absolutely sick. It's beyond disgusting.
I mean, I certainly do find myself at a loss for words, hearing you describe what is going on there. And I really, this is the need. This is why it's important that we do have these conversations and speak about these things and speak about what is going on in Gaza. And we keep the momentum going so that we keep these conversations going until we see better times for the people of Palestine. And then just finally, untying in with the issue of trade with Israel. So we see a top UN court, according to experts, could actually decide to limit Germany's arms sales to Israel. We know that Germany's arms and military equipment sales to Israel increased tenfold last year.
Correct. So Germany feels it's such an irony. It's so. Germany, because of the Holocaust, are indebted to Israel now for life. So whatever Israel does, Germany is not going to do a thing about it. They're just going to turn a blind eye and they're going to support Israel. That's what's been quite evident over the years, and that's what's been evident now in Gaza. Even though there are one or two voices, dissenting voices within Germany who are saying that even though Israel's a friend, you cannot just allow this to happen. Now, Germany is caught between a rock and a hard place because they want to abide by international law, and international law is currently stating that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza. So any supply of weapons to Israel makes the supplier nation of the weapons complicit in a potential genocide here. So the case is actually brought against Germany by Nicaragua. Nicaragua, being emboldened obviously by South Africa's case at the ICJ, now is taking Germany to the ICJ because Germany is one of the leading European nations that supplies Israel with military hardware. So this should be an interesting turn of events. But again, I doubt that Germany is going to pull back, just like the US is not going to scale down any military aid, financial aid to the occupation.
And that, of course, considering that we don't apply enough pressure, and that's why we need to do so. But shukran so much for your time this afternoon and for bringing us the latest that has been unfolding in Palestine. You go well and stay safe.
Jazakallah khair. It's a pleasure.
Assalamu alaikum. That was Khalid Vawda from Social Intifada bringing us the latest developments unfolding in Palestine. 27,000 hectares of land illegally confiscated by apartheid Israel since the 7th of October. We're looking at the genocide unfolding in Gaza, of course, utmost importance to be placed on that, but also other events and developments unfolding in the West Bank. And we should not be blind to those. It's now 6 minutes to 5 p.m. Let's take a nasheed and an ad break. When we come back, we move on to the iftar table.